It's the 1st of May, 1169. A fleet of Norman ships, longboats packed with knights, archers, and mercenaries, crosses the Irish Sea from Wales and lands on the beaches of Bannow Bay, County Wexford. In that single moment, the entire future of Ireland changes forever. What follows is 700 years of colonization, rebellion, famine, and partition, an island that would lose half its population, a language nearly wiped from the earth, a wound that, some would argue, has never fully healed. But what if that fleet never came? What if Strongbow stayed in Wales? What if the Norman knights looked west across the Irish Sea and decided, not today? Today, we're going to rewrite history. We're going to ask what Ireland could have become: a unified Gaelic kingdom, a major European power, a civilization that never had its spine broken by conquest. And by the end of this video, I think you'll see Ireland and its history in a completely different light. Let's go back to 1169 and take the other road. First, let's be clear about something. The Norman invasion of Ireland didn't happen because England wanted to conquer Ireland. It happened because of one man's catastrophic personal failure. His name was Diarmait mac Murchada, King of Leinster. In 1166, Diarmait made enemies of the most powerful men in Ireland. He'd kidnapped the wife of a rival lord, he'd blinded a king's son, and he'd raided monasteries for good measure. He was, by any measure, a difficult man. His enemies, led by the High King of Ireland, Raedri Ua Conchobair, expelled him from the island entirely. So Diarmait did something no Irish king had ever done. He went to England and begged King Henry II for help. Henry, who had a continent to manage and bigger problems than a deposed Irish petty king, gave him a fairly vague letter of permission to recruit soldiers from among the Anglo-Norman lords of Wales. And Diarmait found his man, Richard de Clare, better known to history as Strongbow, a Norman lord with land, ambition, and soldiers. Diarmait offered him something irresistible: the hand of his daughter in marriage and the kingdom of Leinster after Diarmait's death. In 1169, the first wave of Normans landed at Bannow Bay. By 1170, Strongbow himself arrived. Within a year, they had taken Waterford and Dublin, two of the most important cities in Ireland. Henry II, suddenly alarmed that his own lord was carving out a private kingdom, came to Ireland himself in 1171 to assert control. And just like that, Ireland entered the orbit of the English crown. Now here's the key thing to understand. Ireland in 1166 was not a unified country. It was a patchwork of kingdoms: the Uí Néill clans in Ulster, the Ua Conchobair in Connacht, the MacCarthay in Munster, and Diarmait's own Leinster. There was a high king, the Ard Rí, but this was largely a ceremonial title. Real power was local. This is important because it answers our central question. If the Normans hadn't come, what would Ireland have actually looked like? Was unification on the cards? Or would the island have stayed a collection of warring kingdoms forever? To answer that, we need to go back 150 years before the Normans, to the greatest ruler Ireland ever produced, Brian Boru. In 1002, Brian, King of Munster, forced every king in Ireland to submit to him. He wasn't just High King in name. He actually held real authority over the island. He rebuilt churches, repaired roads, imposed taxes. For a brief moment, Ireland had something approaching genuine central rule. He was killed at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, and almost immediately, the old fractures returned. His sons fought over his legacy. The provinces drifted back apart. But here's the crucial insight. Brian had proven it was possible. Ireland could be unified. The machinery existed. The Ard Rí institution, the church networks, the legal system of Brehon law that applied across the whole island. What it lacked was a political leader strong enough to make it permanent. Now, Ruaidhrí Ua Conchobair, the man who expelled Diarmait, was High King when the Normans arrived. And historians have long debated, was he capable of real unification? In our timeline, Ruaidhrí was never able to consolidate power because he was constantly reacting to the Norman presence. He signed the Treaty of Windsor in 1175, essentially accepting English overlordship. He died in a monastery, a spent force. But strip out the Normans, and Ruaidhrí has no external threat to deal with. He has expelled his greatest internal rival, Diarmait. Connacht is dominant. He controls the Shannon, the great artery of Irish trade. Compare this to Scotland. Scotland unified its Pictish and Gaelic kingdoms in the 9th century. Through war, through marriage alliances, through the church acting as a unifying institution. Ireland had all the same ingredients. The monastic network centered on Armagh gave the church extraordinary reach. Brehon law gave the whole island a common legal language. In our alternate timeline, I think Ruaidhrí, or more likely his successor, would have done what Brian Boru had done, but made it stick. A strong high king who ties the provincial lords to him through marriage alliances, through shared military campaigns against Viking settlements in Dublin, through controlling the ports and the trade. By 1200, in our alternate world, it is entirely plausible that Ireland looks like Scotland. A genuine kingdom, with a single monarch, a capital at Cashel or Tara or Dublin, and representation at the courts of Europe. And once you have that, everything changes. Now let's ask the big geopolitical question. Even without the Norman invasion, would England eventually have tried to take Ireland? Almost certainly, yes, in some form. Ireland was strategically vital. It sat on England's western flank. French and Spanish ships could use it as a staging post to attack England. Any English king worth his crown would have been watching Ireland. But there is an enormous difference between trying to influence a neighbor and trying to conquer a subject people. A unified Irish kingdom would have had something that Gaelic Ireland in our timeline never had: diplomatic standing. A recognized king. A seat at the table of European power. The Pope, who actually had significant influence over Ireland through the Church, would have recognized an Irish monarch. England couldn't simply march in and declare ownership the way Henry II's successors gradually did. More likely, the relationship between England and a unified Ireland would have looked something like the relationship between England and Scotland. Two kingdoms on the same archipelago, sometimes allied, sometimes at war, negotiating treaties, trading, intermarrying royal families. There would probably still have been conflict, but it would have been conflict between equals, or at least between recognized sovereign states, and this changes everything that follows. No plantation of Ulster in the 17th century. No deliberate settlement of Scottish Protestants onto confiscated Irish land. No manufactured religious and ethnic divide on the island. No Cromwellian campaigns of the 1640s. No massacres at Drogheda and Wexford. No forced transplantation of the Catholic Irish to Connaught. No penal laws. The brutal 18th century legislation that banned Catholics from owning land, attending university, practicing law, or voting. And without the penal laws, the economic devastation that made the Irish so vulnerable to the potato famine of the 1840s simply doesn't happen in the same way. Think about that chain of causation. One fleet of ships in 1169, and 800 years of suffering flows from it. Remove the fleet, and you remove the root of almost every catastrophe that followed. What does Ireland trade in instead? Almost certainly, Gaelic Ireland would have developed its own merchant class, trading cattle, wool, and hides with France, Spain, and the Hanseatic League. The ports of Cork, Waterford, Limerick, and Dublin would have grown as genuinely Irish commercial hubs, not colonial entrepôts. There is also the fascinating possibility of a Celtic-Iberian alliance. Spain and Ireland had deep cultural and trade connections. The legend of the Milesian Irish actually traces the origin of the Gaels to Spain. A sovereign Ireland with a strong monarchy would have been a natural ally for Spain against England, particularly after the Reformation divides Europe in the 16th century. An Ireland that is a full member of the Catholic bloc, militarily and diplomatically aligned with Spain, is a completely different geopolitical beast. Now let's talk about the thing I find most extraordinary, what a non-invaded Ireland does to Irish culture. In our timeline, the Irish language, Gaeilge, is spoken natively by fewer than 100,000 people. It survived centuries of suppression, schools where children were beaten for speaking it, an economic system where English was the language of opportunity and Gaelic was the language of poverty. Today, preserving it is a heroic act of cultural resistance. In our alternate timeline, Irish is a major European language. Think about it. Without colonial suppression, Irish would have developed naturally, absorbing new vocabulary as societies do, evolving its literature and poetry, producing its own printing press tradition, its own newspapers, its own scientific writing. The bardic tradition, the professional poet class that was the custodian of Irish history, genealogy, and high culture, survives and flourishes. Irish was already spreading in the medieval period. Old Irish manuscripts have been found across Europe. Irish monks were the scholars of early medieval Christendom. A sovereign, literate, expanding Irish state would have produced a literary culture to rival any in Europe. Then comes the Reformation, one of the hinge points of European history. In our timeline, the Reformation in Ireland was a disaster for the Irish because England's Protestant monarchy used it as another tool of control. The Irish resisted becoming Protestant, partly because Catholicism had become synonymous with Irish identity and resistance. But in our alternate timeline, Ireland is a sovereign Catholic state engaging with the Reformation on its own terms. An Irish Archbishop of Armagh, backed by a strong monarchy, might have played a role in the Counter-Reformation similar to the Spanish or Bavarian Church. Ireland becomes a power in European religious politics, not a victim of it, and Brehon law, the ancient Irish legal system, deserves its own moment here. Brehon law was remarkably sophisticated. It had provisions for women's rights, for environmental protection, for contracts, for the rights of the mentally ill, that were genuinely progressive by medieval standards. It was largely dismantled and replaced by English common law after conquest. In our alternate Ireland, Brehon law evolves naturally over centuries. It might look very different from English common law today, possibly closer to some Scandinavian legal traditions. Ireland becomes a different kind of society, shaped by a different legal philosophy. All right, let's bring this home. It's 2025 in our alternate timeline. What is Ireland? First, population. In our real timeline, Ireland has about 5 million people in the Republic, and another 2 million in Northern Ireland. 7 million total on the island. Before the Great Famine of the 1840s, the island had 8 million people. The famine and the waves of emigration that followed cut that nearly in half. and Ireland never fully recovered. In our alternate timeline, no famine structured by colonial land policy, no mass emigration born of desperation, Ireland's population follows a European trajectory. Realistic estimates would put it at somewhere between 15 and 20 million people. A country the size of Germany in terms of population density. And the Irish diaspora? In our world, there are an estimated 80 million people of Irish descent scattered across America, Australia, Canada, and Britain. The diaspora exists because of suffering. In our alternate Ireland, emigration happens. People have always moved. But it's voluntary, not desperate. The diaspora is smaller, and its relationship with the homeland is different. There is no raw wound of forced exile. The island is unified. There is no Northern Ireland as a separate entity. No partition, no troubles. The island might be internally federalized. Ulster, Munster, Leinster, Connaught as administrative regions. But there is one state, one parliament, probably still in Dublin. The Irish language, still spoken natively by millions, perhaps a third of the population, coexisting with English, which would still have come in as a major European language through trade and contact. Bilingual Ireland, a kind of Celtic version of Switzerland or Belgium. And economically, the Celtic Tiger economic boom that Ireland experienced in the 1990s came from a combination of EU membership, foreign investment, and a young educated workforce. In our alternate Ireland, that kind of dynamism arrives much earlier. Ireland has been a trading nation for centuries, with established merchant classes and port cities. Dublin in our alternate 2025 might look more like Amsterdam, a city that has been commercially prosperous and culturally confident for 500 years. There is one more thing worth sitting with. In our real Ireland, the national psyche carries the weight of colonial trauma. The feeling, expressed across Irish literature, music, and politics for centuries, of having been wronged, diminished, occupied. W.B. Yeats, James Joyce, Samuel Beckett, great artists, but artists shaped by a fractured relationship with their own identity and their own land. In our alternate Ireland, there is no such fracture. There is still conflict, still struggle, still the complexity of human life. But the particular wound of colonial subjugation, that deep generational grief, is absent. What literature does that Ireland produce? What music? What does it feel like to be Irish in a country that was never told it was inferior? That might be the most tantalizing question of all. So, let's bring it back to Bannow Bay. 1169. The ships on the horizon. The Norman invasion didn't just change Ireland's politics. It didn't just redraw maps or transfer land from one ruling class to another. It changed the soul of a people. Every rebellion, from Silken Thomas in 1534 to Wolfe Tone in 1798 to the Rising of 1916, traces its roots back to those boats. Every emigrant ship that crossed the Atlantic. Every letter home that said, "I can't come back." Every child raised in Boston or Melbourne or Liverpool who felt Irish but had never seen Ireland. Every time a family in Connaught heard their native language described as the tongue of savages. All of it connects back to Bannow Bay, to one exiled king, to one ambitious Norman lord, to ships that maybe, in another world, never set sail. History is full of these moments, small contingencies that crack open into centuries of consequence. That's what makes alternate history so much more than a game. It forces us to see how fragile the world we live in actually is, how different everything could have been. And in Ireland's case, how much was lost. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think a unified Gaelic Ireland could have held off English power long-term? Or would conquest have come eventually, one way or another? Would you rather live in the Ireland we have, shaped by struggle and resilience and a diaspora that spans the globe, or the alternate Ireland that was never broken in the first place? Let me know in the comments. If you're new here, subscribe. We do alternate history, untold stories, and the moments that changed everything every single week. Go well. And as they say in Irish, slán go foil.